We were twins, born 20 years apart. My name is Susan Miller. I'm 52 years old and I thought I knew everything about my life. A librarian in the small town of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. David's wife for 28 years. Mother of 2 grown children. Jessica, who works as a nurse in Philadelphia, and Thomas, who recently got his engineering degree. October 15th, 2023, at 9:47 a.m., everything changed. I was checking email at the library when a notification from 23andMe popped up. A year and a half ago, my kids gave me a DNA test for my 50th birthday, saying it was trendy to learn about your roots. I did it more out of politeness than interest. New DNA match, possible close relative, 99.9% identity hatch. Name, Hannah Williams, 32 years old, Portland, Oregon. I stared at the screen. 99.9% meant practically identical genetics. Parents, siblings, identical twins. But I was an only child. My parents died over 10 years ago, taking all family secrets with them. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages, trying to find connections between our families. Hannah told me about her parents. Father worked in IT. Mother was a school psychologist. She worked as a graphic designer, lived in a rental apartment in downtown Portland, had recently broken up with her boyfriend. Hannah told me about her childhood in a loving family. Her parents always told her she was their long-awaited miracle. They'd tried for years to have a child, and when she was finally born, it was the happiest time in their lives. This sounded familiar. My parents also always called me their long-awaited miracle. They said they had to try for a long time before I came along, but that I was worth all their efforts. Gradually, our conversation turned to appearance. Hannah described herself. Dark chestnut hair, gray-green eyes, medium height, a mole above her left corner of her mouth. My heart started beating faster. Dark chestnut hair, like mine. Gray-green eyes, like mine. A mole above the left corner of the mouth, exactly like mine. She told me she'd always looked very much like her parents, especially her mother. Melissa also had dark hair and gray-green eyes. Father John was also dark-haired, medium height. Hannah always thought she inherited the best features from both parents, and I really did look very much like my biological parents. My father, Robert, had dark chestnut hair and gray eyes. Mother Elizabeth had chestnut hair and green eyes. I was the perfect combination of their features, which always made my parents happy. We exchanged photos simultaneously. I opened her picture and felt the ground disappear from under my feet. I was looking at my own face. Just 20 years younger. Not just similar features, absolutely identical. The same dark chestnut hair with a slight wave. The same gray-green eyes. The same eyebrow shape. The same lip line. Even the facial expression was mine. Slightly skeptical, with slightly squinted eyes. In her reply message, Hannah wrote that she was in complete shock. She was looking at my photo and seeing herself, just older. She asked how this was even possible. I showed Hannah's photo to David that evening. He was quiet for a long time, shifting his gaze from the computer screen to me, then said it was an eerie resemblance, like someone had taken my photo from 20 years ago. On the weekend, the kids came home. Jessica was amazed by the resemblance, said it was me, just young. Thomas, always more skeptical, suggested it was just an incredible coincidence. With 7 billion people in the world, someone had to look similar. But I knew that 99.9% DNA match, plus absolutely identical appearance, wasn't just coincidence. Hannah and I had a phone call Sunday evening. Her voice was surprisingly similar to mine, just slightly higher in tone and with a light Western accent. She admitted she'd been thinking about this coincidence all week. I decided to look for more information about my birth. I went through my parents' documents stored in the attic. In Mom's medical documents folder, I found several interesting certificates. A consultation with a reproductive specialist in 1970, a certificate for assisted reproductive procedures in 1971, and an insurance statement with huge expenses for infertility treatment. So my parents really did undergo infertility treatment. In the early 70s, this meant the most advanced technology of the time, possibly IVF. Then I found another strange certificate, dated March 1991. My mom was 45 then. I was 20. A certificate from the same reproductive specialist who treated her 20 years earlier. Why would a 45-year-old woman with an adult daughter need a reproductive specialist? I told Hannah about my findings. She also started carefully asking her parents about details of her birth. Gradually, it turned out that her parents also underwent infertility treatment. They were open with her about it. They told her they couldn't have a child for many years, consulted different specialists, tried different treatment methods. But there was one detail that Hannah's parents never talked about in detail. In 1990, they consulted a reproductive medicine clinic in Los Angeles. There they were offered a special procedure. Melissa Williams, Hannah's mother, could carry a pregnancy, but the couple had problems creating viable embryos. The doctors suggested they use a donor embryo, an embryo from another couple that had been frozen and was waiting for suitable recipients. They were told the embryo was from a young couple on the East Coast who already had a healthy child from the same IVF cycle. The embryo had been frozen for many years. The procedure was successful. Melissa got pregnant, carried to term, and gave birth to a healthy baby, Hannah. The parents never hid from their daughter that her conception was special, but didn't go into details about donor procedures. For them, she was their real daughter whom they had waited for so long. When Hannah told me this story, the puzzle pieces started falling into place. A donor embryo from a couple on the East Coast who already had a healthy child from the same IVF cycle, an embryo frozen for many years. Everything pointed to my parents being those donors, and Mom's certificate from 1991 was possibly related to the embryo transfer procedure. I contacted a private investigator in Philadelphia. I explained the situation. Incredible DNA match, birth through donor embryo, suspicions about connection to my family. The investigator, a woman in her 50s named Carol Stevens, listened carefully. She said such cases were more common than people think, especially with the development of DNA testing. She explained the embryo donation procedure to me. After long explanations and providing documents confirming my identity and my parents' death, I was allowed to review archival records. The call from the clinic came Friday morning. The medical archivist spoke carefully, but the information was stunning. My parents really did undergo treatment at the clinic in 1971. The IVF procedure was successful, leading to my birth that same year. During the procedure, 4 viable embryos were created. One was implanted in my mother. That became me. The others were frozen according to standard procedure of that time. In 1991, one of the frozen embryos was transferred to a family from Oregon through the embryo donation program. The procedure was conducted at a partner clinic in Los Angeles. The world around me turned upside down. Hannah and I weren't just similar. We were genetically identical twins, conceived at the same time in 1971. But one of us was born immediately, while the other spent 20 years frozen. I called Hannah with trembling hands and told her about the conversation with the archivist. Hannah was shocked. We were twins, real twins, conceived simultaneously in 1971, but born 20 years apart. My parents, Robert and Elizabeth Miller, were her biological parents, and John and Melissa Williams became her real parents, carrying and raising her with boundless love. We were identical twins, separated by 20 years. But the story was even more complex than we thought. The investigator helped me find out more details about how embryo donation worked in the early 90s. It turned out my parents didn't just anonymously donate embryos. Mom specifically participated in the recipient family selection process. She wanted to make sure the embryo went to good people who could give the child love and opportunities. Mom's certificate from 1991 was related to exactly this process. She underwent medical and psychological consultations as an embryo donor, and the Williams family wasn't chosen randomly. The agency specifically matched couples who physically fit the characteristics of the biological parents. John and Melissa were dark-haired, medium height, educated people from the East Coast, almost perfect match for my parents. This explained why Hannah always considered herself similar to her parents. The Williams were chosen precisely because their future child could naturally fit into their family. A week later, Hannah flew to Pennsylvania. We met at Philadelphia Airport, and it was like looking into a time mirror. Absolutely identical faces, gestures, even a gait. At home, Hannah met David and the kids. Jessica couldn't believe the resemblance. We were like two peas in a pod. Thomas was amazed that we even laughed the same way, held coffee cups the same way, wrinkled our noses the same way when thinking. We spent the weekend comparing our lives. Saying goodbye at the airport, we both understood our lives would never be the same. We found each other despite all circumstances. After her departure, we maintained regular communication, called several times a week, exchanged photos, planned meetings. Hannah introduced me to her parents via video call. John and Melissa Williams turned out to be wonderful people. At first they worried, would their daughter love them less, knowing about her biological family? But Hannah explained that they would forever remain her real parents. And I was a bonus, a sister she never dreamed of. The investigator helped us determine the fate of the remaining embryos. During my parents' IVF in 1971, 4 viable embryos were created. The first became me. The second became Hannah in 1991. The third was transferred to a family in Texas in 1989. But pregnancy didn't occur. The fourth was stored frozen until 2001, then was disposed of when storage time expired. So there could have been more of us. This thought was simultaneously amazing and sad. In spring, Hannah came to Pennsylvania again, this time with a young man named Michael. He was a programmer, worked remotely, and treated our story with genuine interest. At dinner, Michael noticed that we not only looked identical, but behaved identically. Gestured, held forks, wrinkled noses when thinking, even laughed absolutely the same way. Over months of communication, we discovered many small similarities. Identical food preferences. Both loved Italian cuisine and couldn't stand mushrooms. Identical reactions to movies. Both cried at melodramas and laughed at the same comedies. Even slept the same way, on the left side, hugging a pillow. But there were also differences formed by upbringing and environment. Hannah was more spontaneous and adventurous, could suddenly pack for a trip or change jobs. I was more cautious and planning-oriented, always thought about consequences and safety. She grew up in a culture of possibilities where risk was encouraged. I grew up in a culture of stability, where reliability was valued. But our differences only made communication more interesting. I admired her courage and creativity. She valued my life wisdom and ability to see long-term perspectives. In summer, Hannah announced amazing news. She was pregnant. Michael proposed, and they were planning a fall wedding. Hannah joked that her child would be simultaneously my nephew and genetic grandchild. Modern reproductive science created such family puzzles that were previously impossible. At the Portland wedding, I was an honored guest, standing next to Hannah during the ceremony. I thought about the incredible journey that brought us to this moment. From a random DNA test to discovering a family secret, from the shock of recognition to accepting new reality. In winter, Ethan was born, my nephew and genetic grandchild simultaneously. But our differences didn't create a chasm between us. On the contrary, they enriched our relationship. I give her the wisdom of experience. She gives me youthful energy. I show her the value of stability. She shows me the beauty of spontaneity. Sometimes I think about my parents and the decision they made in 1991. They could have simply disposed of the remaining embryos. Instead, they gave another family a chance at life. Thanks to their choice, Hannah appeared in the world. And thanks to modern DNA technology, we were able to find each other. Our story may seem incredible, but in a world of developing reproductive technologies, such cases will become increasingly common. Children born from embryos frozen decades before their birth will search for and find their genetic relatives. This is beautiful, because each such story is a reminder that family isn't limited to traditional frameworks. Family isn't just the people you grew up with. Sometimes family is those you find on life's path and choose to build relationships with. Hannah and I are sisters by genetics, friends by choice, family by decision. We are living proof that love can overcome time, distance, and any complexities of the modern world. Recently, Hannah moved closer to us, to Philadelphia. Michael found work at a local IT company, and Hannah opened a small design studio. Now we see each other every weekend, and little Ethan is growing up knowing he has not only a grandmother on his mother's side, but also an aunt who looks exactly like his mom, just older. My kids sometimes ask if I regret those 30 years Hannah and I lost, not knowing about each other. Honestly, no. Each of us lived exactly the life we needed. I got stability, family, meaning in caring for others. Hannah got freedom, opportunities, a chance to find herself. If we had grown up together, perhaps we would have been less interesting to each other. Our differences, formed by different eras and circumstances, make our relationship richer. Last month, another amazing event occurred. Hannah was pregnant with her second child, and doctors did an ultrasound that showed twins, natural twins. When she called me with this news, we both cried. Family history was repeating, but naturally this time. Hannah's children would have what we didn't: the opportunity to grow up together, from the very beginning. Sometimes I think our story is a reminder of the complexity and beauty of modern life. Technologies that seemed like fantasy in 1971 allowed my parents to have a child and another family 20 years later to get a chance at their own happiness. And technologies that seemed like fantasy in 1991 allowed Hannah and me to find each other and learn the incredible truth about our origin. There's also a sad side to our story. My parents never learned that their decision to help another family led to the birth of another daughter. Our story is a harbinger of what awaits humanity: new forms of kinship, new family connections, new ethical questions. But at the foundation of all this remains something unchanging: the human need for love, family, connection with other people. Hannah and I found each other thanks to science, but built our relationship thanks to something deeper: mutual understanding, shared values, desire to be part of each other's lives. Recently, little Ethan, now 2 years old, said his first complete sentence. He pointed at Hannah and me and said, "Mommy and Aunt Susie same." Children see the world more simply than adults. For Ethan, there's nothing strange about his mom and aunt looking absolutely identical, but living in different houses and being born at different times. It's just a fact of his life, as natural as the sun in the sky or grass on the ground. Perhaps his generation will be more prepared for the complexities of modern family relationships. Perhaps for them, stories like ours will become ordinary. Meanwhile, Hannah and I continue building our relationship day by day. We share joys and problems, support each other, create new family traditions. On Thanksgiving, we gathered together for the first time, both our families at one table. David and Michael discussed sports. Jessica and Thomas shared college stories with the younger Williams. And Hannah and I cooked in the kitchen, moving in perfect synchronization, as if dancing a dance familiar since childhood. Looking at this family chaos, I understood, here it is, the modern family. Not the one described in sociology textbooks, but the one life itself creates. Complex, tangled, but filled with love. Our story began with a simple DNA test done out of curiosity. It led to discovering that somewhere in the world lives a person who is my genetic copy, but at the same time, a completely unique individual with her own history, dreams, and choices. This is a story about how science can create miracles, but real miracles are created by people through their kindness, openness, desire to accept something new and unexpected into their lives. Hannah and I are living proof that family is not only blood and genes, but also choice. The choice to know each other, accept each other, become important in each other's lives. In a world where reproductive technologies create new forms of kinship, our story may seem unusual. But at its core, it's very human, a story about how two people found each other and decided that kinship is worth building and maintaining. We don't know what the future holds. Perhaps science will find ways to create even more complex family connections. Perhaps children will be born in the world from genetic material frozen centuries ago. But whatever the technological possibilities, the foundation of family will remain unchanged. It's love, acceptance, the desire to be near each other. We are twins, born 20 years apart, but who met exactly when we needed each other most.